Okay, let's unpack this. Imagine you're at a family dinner, candles flickering, conversations flowing, but underneath all that, years of quiet tension.
Unspoken history.
Right, and this undercurrent of, well, real cruelty. Then someone whispers something small, maybe innocent even.
Yeah.
And across the table, the mother-in-law overhears. And she delivers this line. It's so cold, so precise, it slices through everything.
And boom, everything changes.
Exactly. That single moment, that's the catalyst for the whole story we're diving into today.
And what makes this deep dive so compelling, I think, is seeing how one moment can be the absolute flashpoint after years of these painful dynamics. It forces this fundamental shift.
Totally.
We're looking at a really personal narrative shared online. It's an intimate account, navigating toxic family, the awful weight of infertility struggles.
Which is just devastating in itself.
Absolutely. And then this maybe unexpected journey towards reclaiming self-worth and finding this quiet but really powerful form of justice.
So the source material here, it's a single narrative. Very raw, incredibly honest. It gives us a front row seat to the messy reality of these complex family relationships.
Yeah, and the very real, often hidden consequences of just persistent cruelty.
Right. So our mission here is to kind of walk through this story, pull out the key moments, understand the motivations maybe hidden beneath the surface.
And the emotional truths. What does it reveal about the cost of being constantly underestimated?
And also where incredible strength comes from, right?
Exactly. Because the journey described, it takes us from profound humiliation and feeling totally silenced.
Which must have been awful.
Oh, yeah. Through this incredibly difficult process of finding a voice, setting some really firm boundaries, and then ultimately, blooming, thriving in a life where, frankly, others fully expected her to just wither away.
It's a powerful story, it really is. Resilience defined, almost.
It really is.
So let's set the scene a bit. The narrator, we'll call her Rachel, as the source does. She's an engineer married to Ben.
Right. And for 3 years, they were on this incredibly difficult path with infertility.
Can you even imagine that cycle of hope and then just crushing frustration?
The source describes it so vividly. The relentless hormone pills, the endless negative tests, the tears hidden away.
God.
The just devastating loss of embryos. And this wasn't just physical, it deeply impacted her self-worth.
How could it not?
She actually says she felt like a burden through it all, which just gives you a sense of the emotional weight she was carrying.
And layered right on top of that personal pain was this incredibly toxic family environment centered around the mother-in-law, Joanne.
Ah, Joanne, yeah. The source paints this picture of a very specific kind of cruelty. Subtle, persistent, slow-acting poison almost.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it.
Definitely. Joanne's specialized in these jabs, always with that, quote, polite smile. Not loud, not dramatic, insidious.
Right.
We get details like mentioning a cousin with a bad uterus while pointedly offering fertility tea.
Oh, wow.
Or leaving parenting magazines open, specifically to pages on advanced age treatments.
Sure.
And Rachel was only 28 at the time.
That's just calculated.
Completely calculated to inflict pain.
And what about her husband, Ben? How did he react over time? Because that's key.
It really is.
Yeah.
And it evolved, which the source shows clearly. At first, it was that common shrug off, oh, that's just how she is.
Heard that one before.
Right. But the narrative shows him becoming colder, more distant, eventually just dismissing Rachel's pain, calling it only my issue.
Oh, so isolating.
That silence and dismissal within the marriage, that's another layer of pain. It almost validates the mother-in-law's actions,
Yeah, implicitly.
And the source is clear. It wasn't just Joanne. The wider family dynamic is described. You have sisters-in-law whispering, aunts avoiding eye contact.
Oh, God.
The narrator felt it acutely. She said she was the issue in the room at every single family gathering.
Just constantly feeling devalued, excluded. She talks about being cut off when speaking.
Opinions ignored.
Yeah, and family decisions like trips or events, they just make them and tell her later, often with flimsy excuses. Treated like a guest, she said, compared to other daughters-in-law.
And the gifts. The contrast in gifts is such a perfect, almost painful illustration.
Tell me about that.
Well, others got expensive jewelry, perfume, her gifts, dish towels, self-help books, and once even a bar of soap with a clearance sticker.
No, a clearance sticker.
Yep. And the source notes they were delivered sweetly, which just weaponizes the whole thing, right? Makes her feel ungrateful that she doesn't appreciate these thoughtful items.
Unbelievable. And Joanne would make these public pronouncements, too, about real women and motherhood.
Oh, yeah. Often directing her gaze and that smile The source calls it that thin, slow, poison-laced smile. Right at Rachel.
Just twisting the knife.
Constantly. And for years, Rachel's coping mechanism was just pretend not to notice, swallow it.
What else could she do, really?
Right. She describes the words feeling like acid, desperately trying to fit in, bringing gifts, helping out, doing everything right. But it was never enough.
Never enough to earn acceptance.
Never. She stayed quiet, she tells us, because she was afraid. Afraid of being labeled ungrateful or bitter or broken.
So she just internalized it all.
Yeah. In Joanne's eyes, she felt like a polished failure. That phrase alone just says so much.
It really does. Which brings us to that dinner scene, the breaking point. No turning back after this.
Definitely not. It was her father-in-law's birthday.
Okay.
The source sets the scene nicely. Rosado wine, roast beef, candles, outwardly totally peaceful.
But that tension was just simmering under the surface.
Always. So while Joanne's telling some story, Rachel leans in and just quietly whispers to Ben about some new IVF appointments opening up in January.
Just a small private moment, husband and wife stuff.
Exactly. Intended only for him. But Joanne heard it.
Of course she did.
And the source describes how she struck like an animal in the dark with cold precision and delivered the line, "Oh, shut up, Baron."
Baron, not Baron. Wow. Okay.
Yeah, Baron, B-A-R-O-N, as spelled in the source.
Yeah.
Just cold. The silence that followed was instant. Absolute.
You could hear a pin drop, I bet.
The source says it was the kind of silence that turns a room into a grave. And maybe the most gut-wrenching part.
What?
The complete lack of reaction. From anyone. Her husband. Silent. Sisters-in-law. Silent. Nobody spoke up. Nobody defended her.
Oh, that's brutal. That silence is the betrayal.
She describes feeling frozen like she'd been slapped. The pain wasn't just the words, cruel as they were. It was the lack of defense, the collective cowardice, the harsh realization, she says, that I was completely alone.
Yeah.
But something shifted right then. The source tells us instead of breaking down, she stood up. With my back straight, her face calm,
Good for her.
quietly said goodnight, got no reply, and just walked out.
Wow. Just walked out.
Driving home, she felt one single hot tear, but she recognized it as rage. The source says something cracked open in her that night.
A breaking point, but also maybe a breakthrough.
Absolutely. The old, quiet version of herself died right there at that dinner table. She describes putting on red lipstick in the rearview mirror, like this small, deliberate act of reclaiming herself, almost like putting on battle paint.
I love that image. Red lipstick defiance.
And in that clarity, that moment of rage and decision, she understood. Joanne knew exactly where her deepest wound was, the infertility, the feeling of failure.
Yeah.
And she aimed right there with precision. That line worked. It landed so hard because the wound was already open from years of those subtle attacks, the dismissal.
Okay, so that understanding, that's what fueled what came next, which she calls not just revenge, but justice.
Right, justice for herself. She decided the story would end with Joanne's downfall, and she knew exactly where to start, where it would hurt Joanne the most.
Let me guess. Her wallet.
Bingo, her wallet. Because this is where the source drops a bombshell. A stunning hidden reality.
Okay.
For the past 6 months, Rachel had been paying for everything.
Everything, like the mortgage, bills.
Everything. The mortgage, the household bills, groceries, health insurance, and yes, even Joanne's many luxuries.
Wait, why? What happened to Ben?
Ben had lost his job half a year earlier, and Rachel had just silently taken on the entire financial burden, kept the ship afloat.
Oh, okay. And Joanne had no idea.
Absolutely no idea who was actually footing the bill. She just continued her pattern of entitlement, announcing needs like demand spa money, Uber Black.
Unbelievable.
Even complained about the cleaning lady's price going up, just expecting Rachel through Ben to cover it. She assumed the support was guaranteed, never showed an ounce of gratitude.
So Rachel knew exactly where the levers were.
Precisely. So the action she took was strategic, quiet, targeted. She canceled specific accounts she was paying for that second credit card in Ben's name.
Okay.
Joanne's salon membership, her gym plan, things that were pure luxury.
Right.
And the strategy, as the source puts it, was clear. The goal wasn't noise. The goal was to let her feel it slowly, like a dripping tap being turned off.
With the consequences sinking gradually.
Exactly. The first public ripple came quickly. Joanne's card declined at the salon.
Ooh, that had to sting. Publicly.
Oh, yeah. The source describes her furious call to Ben. Outraged, humiliated, and in that moment, Ben looked at Rachel.
And he knew.
And the source says, in that silence between them, he understood exactly who had made the change. No words needed.
So what happened next? Did Rachel talk to her?
She did. Followed up with a calm, measured conversation with Joanne. Explained very clearly it wasn't a mistake. She just suggested, cutting back on extras since Ben was out of work.
Oh, that's beautifully passive-aggressive, in a way, stating the obvious financial reality.
Totally. The source says Joanne was stunned. For the first time ever, hung up without a word. Speechless.
Then what? Joanne tried to play the victim, I assume.
Predictably. Went to her kids, claiming Rachel was treating her like a burden. But the source reveals the family's response was telling.
Let me guess. Silence.
Silence. Again.
Wow.
And this is a crucial insight from the source. Rachel saw this not just as revenge, but as justice for me.
Right.
She understood that the family's silence this time wasn't just cowardice. It was because nobody actually believed Joanne's victim act.
I knew her too well.
They all knew she used people. They knew she couldn't function without that flow of luxury the money provided. So this quiet turning off of the faucet, it was the beginning of Joanne's whole world starting to unravel.
And unravel it did, right?
Yeah.
Because her whole identity, her status, it was all built on that money, those appearances.
Absolutely. The source really highlights that. Joanne's entire social standing was fueled by the luxury Rachel had been providing. So the cuts weren't just inconvenient.
No, they hit her right where she lived.
Exactly. They started cracking the foundation of her empire, as the source calls it.
So the salon was just the start.
Just the opening act. The source details this really humiliating incident during brunch with her friends. Card declined again. Had to abandon her meal.
Oh, man, in front of her friends. That's gotta hurt the image.
Immensely. And small towns. Gossip spreads like wildfire. Joanne's having money problems.
Wait, the whispers start.
The neighborhood started noticing subtle signs. Swapping premium meat for cheaper cuts at the store, canceling nail appointments. The source points out Joanne just didn't know how to be subtle. She'd been queen for so long, she never learned how to be ordinary.
Huh. So her struggle was pretty public.
Very public. Even Ben started noticing his mother getting more irritable, snappy.
And Rachel explained why.
Yeah. Her explanation to him, according to the source, was incredibly insightful. She said something like, she's been acting the same. The only difference is you're no longer paying her bills, and now she's showing her claws.
Ooh, direct. How did he take that?
The source says Ben didn't argue. He just knew. Silent acknowledgement.
So Joanne tried to fight back somehow.
She did. Tried spreading rumors at church, claiming Rachel was deliberately sabotaging her out of pure spite.
The classic Darby, deny, attack, reverse victim and offender.
Pretty much. But when someone confronted Rachel directly about these rumors, her response, as described in the source, was just calm and direct. She said she simply stopped funding the luxuries of someone who had never shown her respect. Period.
Clean. Simple. True.
The person hearing it was reportedly stunned into silence, couldn't argue with the logic.
And then the final blow to her status, the country club.
Ah, yes, the country club. Turned away for overdue payments. Right there in front of the local elite she desperately wanted to impress.
Maximum public humiliation.
Complete. The source offers this powerful observation. When pride falls, it makes a lot more noise than any physical crash.
That's quite a line. So, as Joanne's world is imploding, what's happening with Ben, with the marriage?
Well, Ben's reaction, the source tells us, was complicated. Confused, quiet, avoiding eye contact.
Sounds about right.
The source suggests he was finally seeing the reality of his mother, the situation, but had, quote, no idea where he stood or how to process it, couldn't confront it.
And Rachel realized she couldn't wait for him anymore?
Exactly. That painful realization. Waiting for him to finally choose her, or even just acknowledge her pain. It was futile. It was just too late for them.
Did they talk about it? About the money for his mom?
There was this one confirmation conversation.
Yeah.
Ben finally brought up his mother's financial issues, asked if Rachel had really canceled everything.
And she said?
Her reply, from the source, was simple but firm. She needs to learn how to stand on her own.
Wow. Setting a boundary for Joanne, but also kind of for him too.
Absolutely. And the source describes Ben's reaction: visible embarrassment, shame, realizing he couldn't afford his mother's lifestyle, seeing her weakness exposed. But even then,
Still silent.
still silent. That silence was the loudest statement.
So the marriage just faded out.
Disintegrated into complete silence and distance.
Yeah.
The source quotes Ben saying at one point, I think we lost ourselves.
And Rachel's response, that was powerful.
Incredibly powerful, reclaiming her experience. No, you left me back there. I just kept walking.
Oof. That hits hard. It captures so much.
It really does. And her perspective on his betrayal is another key insight. It wasn't about physical infidelity.
Yeah, it was something else.
Something slower, more painful, she says. It was all those times he chose his mother through silence.
Right. The silence during the jokes, pretending to sleep when she cried.
Exactly. His dismissiveness during the infertility struggles. Each small act of silence was a betrayal that just accumulated over time.
So the marriage ended, described as old and painful.
Ben left with minimal possessions, and Rachel describes feeling this calm emptiness, a silence full of endings. Not necessarily happy, but peaceful, a release.
And life after that, what did that look like?
It became about finding her own rhythm, freedom, comfort in that silence, finally. She focused on work, started traveling alone, changed her environment.
Making a clean break.
Consciously removing traces of that unfair past, rebuilding herself independently, on her own terms.
And then life throws a curveball.
Then, as the source puts it beautifully, when she least expected it, someone new entered her life. A widower, a father. Described by his calm eyes and, crucially, his ability to just listen, without judgment.
That sounds like exactly what she needed.
Completely. The relationship progressed naturally, no pressure about having children, given her history, and his simple reassurance. He told her they were already a family. That healed her, she says, more than any treatment.
Wow. That's, powerful.
And then, defying all expectations, all those years of struggle,
Don't tell me.
the unexpected happened. A pregnancy.
No way.
On the very first try, after years of treatments, pain, struggle.
Oh my God. That's incredible.
And this led to the source's most profound realization, the absolute core truth she had to uncover for herself.
Which was?
The problem was never me.
Goosebumps.
Right. All the suffering, the IVF failures, feeling broken, it wasn't her fault. Her body wasn't flawed. It was just in the wrong place.
Meeting the wrong relationship, the wrong environment.
Exactly. The toxic environment, the stress, the emotional toll. It had worn her down. Physically, emotionally.
And the release that must have come with that realization.
Immense. The source describes her just crying. Crying for all the past pain, blaming herself, swallowing all those words, Joanne's cruelty, Ben's silence. Just crying until her body finally let go.
A necessary catharsis.
Totally. And her new husband's reaction, highlighted in the source, is just truly loving. He held her. Coyly, he said, I knew.
I knew. Simple, perfect.
That simple phrase, she says, showed her what real love, real acceptance felt like.
So her definition of victory changed, didn't it?
Completely. It wasn't just about cutting Joanne off financially anymore. It was fundamentally about moving forward and blooming right where she bet I'd wither.
The personal growth, that was the real win.
That was the real win. And she made this deliberate choice to let the truth of her pregnancy reach Joanne.
How so? Not directly.
No, not as a confrontation or provocation. More like justice for herself. And she notes, for other women who've been diminished like she was, the truth itself would be the statement.
Let the universe handle the delivery, so to speak.
Kind of, yeah. In their small town, the news just spread organically. Her husband helping her out, buying prenatal vitamins. Small visible signs people noticed.
Okay, so how did Joanne find out?
The source describes it vividly. An old church friend saw Joanne at the bank. Making polite conversation, just drops the news. Did you hear about Rachel? She's pregnant. What a blessing, right?
Oh boy. Straightforward, innocent even.
Totally innocent delivery. But the impact? The source details Joanne's physical reaction, freezing, clutching her purse, walking straight out, maybe even tripping on the sidewalk.
Wow, just the power of simple truth.
It's a powerful image, right? How truth, delivered simply, can just bring someone to their knees when their whole world is built on lies and cruelty.
And Ben, how did he find out?
A couple of days later, from a cousin. And the source draws this powerful contrast. His life now involved a new marriage, big wedding, new house. But notably, no children yet.
That contrast is stark.
His reaction, as the source puts it, was his ego turning to dust. He understood right then that they, his mother and himself, had actively chosen to blame Rachel for a truth that was always there, but just inconvenient for their narrative.
The truth that the infertility wasn't solely her fault.
Exactly. That it was likely situational, environmental, maybe even involving him, but blaming her was easier.
And Joanne's cruel words, "Shut up, Aaron,"
became poison she now had to swallow, as the source says. The source mentions her calling Ben, crying.
Oh.
And his subsequent silence and anger. Rachel interprets that as implicitly directed at his own situation, the undeniable truth her pregnancy represented. Maybe misdirected at his new wife, even.
Wow, the ripple effects.
Huge. And Rachel's final perspective on justice. She didn't need to yell, didn't need to make a scene. Her truth, her pregnancy, her new life, her blooming, it had just arrived
Yeah.
at the perfect time, in the most painful way for them. Undeniable proof she was never empty,
Yep.
always full of life, strength, potential.
And she eventually told her new husband everything.
Yeah, she shared the full, raw story through a letter she wrote in therapy. His reaction, supportive. He cried, held her, completely accepting.
That's wonderful. A safe harbor, finally.
It seems so. And Joanne, did she ever try to reach out again?
One final attempt, the source mentions. A phone call.
And Rachel.
Yeah.
Her ultimate act of setting that boundary, the final word in that relationship, simple, definitive. She hung up the phone.
Wow. Just click and scene.
And scene.
So this deep dive, it really takes us through an incredible journey, doesn't it? From enduring the systemic disrespect, profound personal pain,
Through the definitive act of setting boundaries, reclaiming control.
to finding real liberation, new love, and this deep personal vindication. It's quite something.
It really forces us to reflect on some big themes, I think. The painful complexity of navigating truly toxic family dynamics. The often unseen power of financial ties within relationships. How much control that can represent.
Definitely. And the quiet, immense strength it takes to finally walk away from something harmful.
And that profound healing, finding genuine acceptance after years of feeling fundamentally inadequate. It's huge.
So as you, our listener, reflect on this story, maybe consider how you define personal justice. Is it only about seeing consequences for the person who caused pain?
Right. Or is it more about that challenging but ultimately liberating process of reclaiming your own narrative? Finding peace, rebuilding your life, completely independent of whether the other person ever gets it or apologizes.
Yeah, that independence feels key.
I think so. Which leaves us with this powerful question to ponder, maybe. What does it truly mean to win a deeply personal conflict like this?
Is that victory found more in the other person's downfall, seeing them get what they deserve?
Or is it found in the quiet, undeniable strength and fulfillment that comes from building a rich, thriving life, exactly where someone else bet you would only wither? Where do you find the real win,